The television hissed softly in the corner of the motel room, casting a bluish pulse across the cracked ceiling. Rain thudded rhythmically against the windows, blurring the neon sign outside into a bleeding smear of red and gold. A woman in her late 30s sat cross-legged on the bed, a notebook in her lap, a pen clenched in her fingers like it was a lifeline. Code 3 reacts with negative emotion, she whispered under her breath, writing furiously. Observe time lag, 3.7 seconds, again. Her name was Mara Quinn, a former data analyst from upstate New York. But no resume, no past title, no LinkedIn profile could explain what had just happened in room 12B. Across from her, the motel clock flickered 2:48 a.m., but she knew it wasn't right. Her watch still said 2:41. Mara stood and crossed to the desk, where a stack of Polaroids was laid out carefully beside 4 small, identical cassette tapes, each labeled only with a number, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one played something different. Not music, not speech, just tones, layered and coded in patterns she still didn't fully understand. She played tape 3 again. The tone was low, pulsing, almost biological in its rhythm. As it filled the room, her stomach twisted like it had the first time in Portland, and again in that warehouse in Tulsa. The sensation always came before something bent. There, again. The clock blinked. 2:42. She turned to the window, suddenly breathless. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still wet. No thunder, no wind, no transition, just a jump cut in reality. And someone was standing across the lot just past the vending machines. She pressed her palm to the glass. The figure didn't move. Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a coat too thick for the Georgia spring, his face obscured by the shadow of the eave. But she recognized the outline, the posture, Dr. Julian Voss. He wasn't supposed to know she was here. She stepped back and turned off the tape. The tone ceased, and the air immediately felt lighter, like a curtain lifted. When she looked back out the window, he was gone. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, 28. That was all the message said. Her breath caught in her throat. It was starting again. The sun rose reluctantly over rural Georgia, casting long golden streaks through the blinds of the motel room. Mara hadn't slept. She'd sat on the edge of the bed all night, eyes fixed on the cassettes. The message, 28, kept echoing in her mind like a warning bell. 28 was the number Dr. Voss had whispered during their last meeting in Cambridge, 6 months before he disappeared. Back then, she thought he was unraveling, delirious from isolation and paranoia. He talked about information fields, about morphic resonance, about codes that could shift not just perception, but time itself. She dismissed most of it as theoretical rambling, until she started running the tests herself. Now she was on her 4th state in 2 months, dragging around the tapes, the notes, the tapes again, each one unlocking strange phenomena, nothing she could explain with logic, nothing she could share without sounding insane. And now Voss was here. Or was he? She pulled out her laptop and opened the encrypted folder. Inside, a spreadsheet labeled Field Events, Q4. She scrolled to the last entry, 0317 Chattanooga. Code 2 played for 3 minutes, electrical field disrupted, streetlight pattern shifted out of sequence. Witness, none. Time distortion, 1.1 sec. Every data point told a similar story, momentary glitches in reality following exposure to one of the 4 codes. But the distortions were growing stronger, more consistent. Less like coincidences, more like intentional design. Her inbox pinged. Sender J. Voss, retired@protonmail.com. Subject, only 28 days left. Mara froze. She clicked it open. No message body, just an attached audio file. She hesitated, then put on headphones and hit play. At first silence, then a slow mechanical voice. You were never meant to find these. But now that you have, understand this. Code 4 is not a key, it's a lock, and you've already turned it halfway. The message ended with static. She ripped the headphones off, a knock at the door. She stood slowly. No one knew she was here. She grabbed the Polaroids and shoved them into her bag. Another knock, louder this time. Mara crossed the room and peeked through the peephole. No one. But something was on the ground. A cassette, unlabeled. She opened the door cautiously and picked it up. The tape felt warm, like it had just come from a machine. When she stepped back inside, she noticed something strange. The TV was on again, but she hadn't touched it. The screen showed static and through it, barely visible, her own face. Not live, not mirrored. It was her from yesterday, sitting in the same spot, notebook in hand. The tape in her palm pulsed softly with heat. Something had changed. The diner across the street was the kind of place that hadn't changed since 1974. Linoleum floors, burnt coffee, and a jukebox that only played old Patsy Cline songs. Mara sat in the corner booth, the unlabeled cassette in her jacket pocket, untouched. She stirred her coffee, eyes locked on the waitress behind the counter. Her name tag said Lena, and she hadn't looked up once since Mara walked in. That was the third thing that felt off. The first was the jukebox playing the same verse of Crazy on repeat. Perfect loop, no clicks. The second was her phone's home screen. The clock had frozen at 8:09 a.m. She glanced at the cassette again. She hadn't dared to play it. "Refill?" the waitress asked suddenly. Mara jumped. Lena was right next to her, coffee pot hovering. No, I'm good," she said, closing her hand over the tape. Lena stared at her a second longer than was natural. Then, almost too casually, "You working with sound?" Mara blinked. "Sorry?" "You've got the look," Lena said, nodding at the recorder sticking out of her backpack. "Musician, right?" "Sort of," Mara lied. "Research." Lena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Gotta be careful with those frequencies. Some of them mess with more than just your hearing." Before Mara could ask what she meant, Lena turned and walked away. Mara pulled out her notebook and scribbled down the exchange. She'd learned over the last few months that these moments, the strange conversations, the slips, were often connected. She watched the steam curl off her coffee and tried to ground herself. What do I know? 4 original cassettes, each linked to a measurable environmental effect: lights, clocks, movement. But now this 5th one had appeared. No label, no source, and her face on the motel TV from the past. She took out her portable player, inserted the tape, and hit play. Silence. Then a pulse. Slow, heavy, like a heartbeat submerged in water. Her vision blurred. The diner wavered slightly. She looked up. Every person in the diner had stopped moving. Mid-chew, mid-step, frozen like mannequins. Outside the window, traffic lights blinked out of rhythm. A crow hovered in mid-air, wings paused between flaps. She ripped out the headphones. Everything resumed instantly. People moved. The jukebox clicked into the second verse. The crow landed on a telephone wire. She stared, heart pounding. This wasn't just perception. It wasn't her imagination. The cassette had altered time again. And it was spreading. She turned back to Lena, but the waitress was gone. In her place on the counter sat a note. 28 codes. Only 4 were made public. The rest are waking up. Beneath it, another Polaroid. This one of her sitting in the booth she was in now, but taken from outside the window. She looked up quickly. No camera, no person, just her reflection staring back, wide-eyed. Mara left the diner fast, heart racing, the Polaroid clutched in her hand. The air outside was thick with humidity, even though the forecast had promised dry skies. Something about the note, only 4 were made public, wouldn't let go of her mind. 28 codes. It changed everything. What if the 4 she had weren't the full picture? What if they were just the beginning? She walked 2 blocks north to a public library, the kind still too outdated to require ID for computer use. She needed to search something. Someone. She typed, Dr. Julian Voss disappearance. Dozens of articles popped up, obituaries, conspiracy blogs, academic forums, all said the same thing. Disappeared 6 months ago from a rented cabin in Vermont. Car still parked outside. Notebook found open. No trace of foul play. No official conclusion. But one article stood out, dated only 3 days ago. Dr. Voss sighted near Savannah, Georgia. There was a blurry photo attached. It was him, standing outside a gas station, wearing the same coat she saw from the motel window. Same posture, same stillness. But he was holding something. She zoomed in. A cassette. Her breath caught. He had another one. She printed the article and shoved it in her bag. Her thoughts raced. Why show himself now? Why let her see him? As she stepped out of the library, a man brushed past her. Tall, wiry, clean-shaven. He didn't look back, but Mara stopped cold. She knew that face. It was the same man from the background of 3 different Polaroids she'd collected. Same dark eyes, same faded blue windbreaker. She spun around. "Hey!" But he was gone. Nowhere in sight. No open shops. No alleys. She walked back toward the motel. Faster this time. The tape in her bag still felt warm. When she entered the room, she noticed 2 things immediately. The tapes had been moved. Not stolen, just rearranged. Her notebook was open to a page she didn't remember writing. At the top, in her handwriting, Code 7 reacts to intent. She sat down, trying to calm her breathing. Was someone getting into her mind? Or was she starting to fracture? She didn't have time to wonder. Her phone buzzed again. New voicemail. Unknown number. She played it. "You need to leave the state now. Code 7 cannot be reversed once activated, and he knows you've found it." Click. No voice she recognized, but no doubt who he was. Dr. Voss, or whatever he'd become. Mara grabbed her gear. The tapes, the photos, everything. She knew now that the codes weren't just manipulating perception, they were attracting attention. Other people who understood them, maybe even created them, and others who were being changed by them. As she opened the door, her reflection in the mirror froze mid-step, even as she kept moving. She didn't look back. Mara drove with the windows down, letting the wind keep her awake. She hadn't slept in over 36 hours. The cassette player on the passenger seat was silent now, but its presence felt heavier with each passing mile. She wasn't running away, she was circling closer, back to Savannah, back to where Voss had last been seen. She pulled off the interstate at a rest stop lined with moss-covered oaks and vending machines from another era. A young boy, maybe 9 or 10, sat cross-legged near the edge of the lot, sketching in a spiral notebook. She passed him without a word, but something tugged at her. He was humming, a slow mechanical pattern. It was the same rhythm as Code 1. She turned back. "Hey, what are you drawing?" The boy looked up. Calm eyes, too calm. "Pictures, I hear." He flipped the notebook toward her. One page showed a figure in a long coat, holding a cassette, surrounded by numbers, 28 repeated in rows. Another showed her Mara, standing in front of the diner window, looking scared. "How do you know?" she started. "I don't know," he said. "It just comes." She crouched. "Have you seen that man, the one in the coat?" The boy nodded. "He's been here. He asked about Code 8. Do you know what that is?" He frowned. "It's one of the locked ones, the ones that aren't real yet." Mara blinked. "What do you mean, aren't real?" He tapped his head. "My dad says things become real when we believe them hard enough. Maybe someone's believing too hard." She wanted to ask more, but his mother appeared at the far end of the lot, calling him back. He ran off, notebook still in hand. She sat on the hood of her car, breathing in the thick Georgia air. The codes were bleeding into people, not just affecting time or perception, but planting ideas, visions, maybe even rewiring reality itself. She checked her phone again. No new messages. She reached into her bag and pulled out the unlabeled cassette. Her finger hovered over the play button, but then a new sound, not from the tape, from behind the trees. A looped whisper carried on the wind. "You're already too late, too late, too late." She stood and walked toward the source. Each step brought the whisper louder. Beyond the trees was a clearing, and a small rusted shed with a satellite dish bolted to the roof. She pushed the door open. Inside, a desk, a single chair, and dozens of cassette tapes lined up in 2 neat rows, each labeled Codes 5 through 27. Her mouth went dry. She took a step closer, and a motion sensor clicked on a small screen. It showed a timestamp, April 21st, 2025, 7:12 p.m. Then a video began playing. It was her standing exactly where she stood now, whispering the words she hadn't said yet. "He's not trying to stop the codes. He's trying to finish them." Mara stood frozen in the shed, eyes locked on the screen still glowing in front of her. Her own voice echoed back through the tiny room. "He's trying to finish them." She hadn't spoken those words yet, not out loud. She backed away slowly. The cassettes, Codes 5 through 27, were labeled meticulously, handwritten, neat, and chillingly uniform. Someone had been maintaining this archive, testing, cataloging. The question wasn't just who anymore, it was how long. She picked up the one marked Code 13. As her fingers touched it, a small jolt ran through her arm, like static, but sharper. The hair on her neck stood up. Behind her, something creaked. She turned fast. Nothing but the soft hum of electricity. Then she noticed it, etched into the inside of the shed's metal wall behind the cassettes. A string of numbers, deeply scratched, like someone had done it in desperation. 030717 421 25 05 13 25 06 01 25 dates. She recognized the first. It was the day of her first test in Portland. The second was today. The third and fourth, upcoming. Were they scheduled activations? She snapped a photo and grabbed codes 13 and 18. As she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. Another voicemail. No caller ID. She hit play. The longer you run the tapes, the stronger the echo gets. It's not the sound, it's the field it creates. Your memories, your future. It's all just feedback now. Then silence. She stepped out into the dusk. The wind had picked up and the clouds above swirled unnaturally fast, like time was folding overhead. Back at her car, she tossed the new cassettes into her bag and slammed the trunk. She looked around the lot. The boy and his mother were gone. The rest stopped completely empty, and something new caught her eye. Carved into the dirt beside her back tire, scraped like with a key, were 4 digits, 028. She didn't carve it. She didn't hear anyone. But it was fresh. The number again. Everything pointed back to 28. Not just a warning. A threshold. Inside the car, she powered up her recorder and played code 13. This time she braced herself. The sound was soft, like breath through reeds. Then layers of voices, none distinguishable. A whisper of hundreds, maybe thousands. The windshield fogged from the inside. Words formed in the condensation. Welcome to the echo. Her stomach dropped. The car dashboard flickered. GPS went blank. Phone died, engine still running. Then, the voice again through the speakers. This time clear. Mara Quinn, last known anchor. You've passed the median point. Next shift in 72 hours. Prepare code 28. The message ended. The fog disappeared. Everything looked normal again. But Mara knew better. Reality hadn't broken. It had bent. And now it was waiting for her next move. 3 days later, Mara sat in a storage unit 10 miles outside of Athens, Georgia. The walls were lined with foam for soundproofing. Every traceable device, her phone, laptop, GPS, was destroyed and dumped in the river. This time she didn't need interference. She needed focus. On the table before her sat all 28 tapes. Code 28 had arrived that morning. No return address, just a package wrapped in brown paper left on the hood of her car during the night. No footsteps, no camera footage, nothing. But the moment she touched it, something settled inside her, like a circuit closing. She recorded herself just in case, not for proof. She no longer believed anyone would believe her, but for memory, because time had already begun to fray. April 21st, 9:17 p.m., she said into the recorder, testing code 28. She loaded the tape, pressed play. The sound didn't start. The room did. The fluorescent lights dimmed, not from power loss, but as if light itself was retreating. The air grew heavier, not suffocating, anchored. Then, the sound. A low hum that seemed to come from inside her skull. It didn't move through the air. It bypassed the ears completely, vibrating against her thoughts. Images surged behind her eyes. A hospital hallway, a baby crying. A young Mara watching her father burn every notebook in his basement. He knew. The images blurred, bled together. People she had never met. Moments she hadn't lived. Yet they all felt familiar, as if the code had cracked something deeper than memory. It was rewriting her story. She gripped the table to stay upright. The air turned sharp. And then, silence. Not quiet. Total absence. No hum, no wind, no breath. Even her heartbeat vanished from perception. And in that void, a voice. You are not the observer, you are the field. Then light returned. Sound. Her heartbeat. The storage unit felt normal again, except for one thing. The cassettes were gone. Every single one. In their place sat a notebook, bound in cracked leather, just like her father's. She opened it slowly. Every page was filled. In her own handwriting, diagrams, maps, audio signatures, predictions, timelines extending decades forward. She flipped to the last page. Her name. Then, beneath it, 28 complete. Cycle stable. Begin again. She stared at those words, pulse rising. This had never been about stopping the codes. It wasn't about hiding them. It was about completing a loop. And she was the loop. The echo, the source, and the signal. Outside, thunder cracked, though the sky was clear. She stepped out into the warm Georgia night, the notebook tucked under her arm. Somewhere in the distance, a child would hear a tone they couldn't forget. A reflection would move before the person did. A voice would whisper, "Welcome back." And the cycle, new, different, same, would begin again. Mara took a breath and walked forward.